What do the following have in common? Eating at a cheap lunch buffet, spending an entire weekend watching TV, and taking a swim on the first day of spring. Here's your answer. Each of these things seems great in the beginning, but all of them end up not quite sitting right. The lunch buffet's endless supply of lemon custards seems heavenly until your fifth bowl. A weekend of TV seems relaxing until you find yourself watching a MASH rerun for the third time. The spring lake looks refreshing until you remember that humans were not meant to swim in 34-degree water on a 55-degree day. In our reading for today, Robert Nozick and Bernard Williams argue that utilitarianism should be placed in this group. Indeed, both would be more than willing to admit utilitarianism's initial appeal. After all, what doesn't seem great about the claim that happiness is the only good, and the only true good and ethical actions are those that lead to a happier world? But the thing is, the philosophers continue, much like the lunch buffet's chrome ice cream dispenser and the lazy boy's insistent call, utilitarianism's appeal is false and misleading. In other words, both Nozick and Williams feel that, despite its attractiveness, utilitarianism does not sit right as an ethical system. Both of their critiques thus attempt to discover why this is so. Nozick's attempt takes the form of a thought experiment. Now, a thought experiment is slightly different than one of the scientific variety. Nozick has no need for beakers, cultures, or controls. This is because a thought experiment is less like an experiment and more like what a kindergarten teacher might call an exercise of the imagination. Indeed, thought experiments simply ask us to imagine, usually odd scenarios, in order to pin down our thoughts about something extremely specific. In Nozick's thought experiments, he is trying to pin down our thoughts about utilitarianism's claim that happiness is the only good. Now, says Nozick, everyone knows that perfect happiness is impossible to attain in a world like ours. But let's imagine a situation in which it would be possible. Let's say there's a machine called the experience machine. We can plug into it and have nothing but experiences of pleasure, never any pain. What's more, everyone in the world gets to plug in. The experience machine would therefore bring about a perfectly happy world, if only we plug into it. So, would we plug in? Nozick answers, of course not. I think it would be pretty hard to disagree with him here. Indeed, the experience machine seems horrific. More like something out of a poorly made sci-fi thriller than heaven. So what does this horror mean? Nozick suggests that our disgust at the experience machine must mean that something matters to us, that something is good, other than happiness. Indeed, as the experience machine would allow us to be perfectly happy, and as we don't want this, there must be something besides happiness that we see as part of a worthwhile and ethical existence, as part of the good life. This, then, Nozick continues, is why utilitarianism doesn't sit right with us. Indeed, the experience machine shows that utilitarianism cannot be correct in its claim that happiness is the one good thing. Bernard Williams, the second philosopher we read for today, agrees with Nozick that utilitarianism does not sit right. However, Williams resists the temptation to make up a matrix-like machine of doom, and instead approaches the ethical theory from a different angle. So William begins, utilitarianism says that goodness consists solely in the world being as happy as possible, and that rightness is thus producing this happy world. But when we describe goodness and rightness in this way, Williams goes on, it means that ethics says nothing about who brings happiness into the world, only that it should be brought in. This is slightly confusing, so consider the following scenario. Let's say Gary and Larry are returning from a lunch buffet, both carrying a loaf of bread. They are approached by a homeless man who asks for one of the loaves. Now clearly, there would be more happiness in the world if the homeless man gets his bread. Therefore it is right for either Gary or Larry to give the guy a loaf. However, utilitarianism can say nothing about whether Gary or Larry should give up his loaf. As long as the homeless guy gets some bread, the world is happier, and the right thing has been done. Whether Gary or Larry chooses to be the bread giver is therefore, to utilitarianism, ethically irrelevant as whether the homeless man is or is not wearing a bowler cap. Now, this ethical irrelevancy could seem like a good thing. Indeed, it seems like certain things are right regardless of who does them. In Gary and Larry's case, it is ethically irrelevant who gives the man the bread. But, continues Williams, the person producing happiness is not always irrelevant. Consider the second scenario. Jim is one unlucky dude. While trekking in the jungles of South America, he has stumbled on a town where Pedro, the local revolutionary, has tied up 20 villagers and is threatening to shoot them to set an example. However, when Pedro notices Jim in the crowd, he makes a deal. If Jim shoots one villager, he will spare the other 19. If Jim refuses, all 20 are still going to die. Now, the utilitarian has to reply that Jim must do that which creates the most happiness in the world. Thus, Jim must clearly shoot the villager. What is more, utilitarianism says that it is completely ethically irrelevant that it is Jim who will be acting to produce this happiness. In this situation, says Williams, it is probably true that Jim should shoot the villager. However, utilitarianism isn't correct in its claim that Jim shooting the villager is ethically irrelevant. Indeed, if Jim didn't care at all that he had to shoot a villager to create a happier world, we would think of him as an ethically poor individual, as far from being good. To put it differently, we have a strong sense that while it might be right for Jim to shoot the villager, it is still ethically relevant that he has to. We have a strong sense, in other words, that Jim's action of killing the villager would not be a purely good one. Utilitarianism, in its claim that happiness is the only good, cannot make sense of this ambiguity. Therefore, concludes Williams, as it seems ethically important to us that Jim must kill someone in this situation, it must be true that something matters to us other than happiness, that something besides happiness is good. Therefore, utilitarianism cannot be correct. Now then, we have reached the end of Williams' critique of utilitarianism. Like Nozick, he suggests that there is something besides happiness that we see as good, and this is why utilitarianism does not sit right with us. So what is it besides happiness that's good? The philosophers give slightly different answers, but Williams is more fleshed out, so we'll cover his rather than Nozick's. Williams begins by asking us to think about our projects, or we could say, our commitments. We all have them. We are committed to the people we love, to the things we do, to our countries, to lunch buffets, and so on. In the examples above, Jim, if he is a normal sort of guy, is thus probably committed to not killing people. Most of us are. Now, since utilitarianism claims that happiness is the only good, the only way it can evaluate our commitments is by considering the happiness they will lead to. This is why, in Jim's case, he abandons his commitment to not killing people. If he sticks with it, the world will be a less happy place. And that, utilitarianism would say, is that. The thing that's wrong with this, says Williams, is that is not that. Indeed, we don't actually see it as good and right to treat our commitments like this. When we are committed to something, it isn't that we should drop this commitment every time we can bring about more happiness. It wouldn't be good, for instance, for us to break our family commitments just because we find another family we could make happier. Similarly, it isn't simply right that Jim should drop his commitment to not kill people just because in this instance it would produce less happiness. Commitments, in other words, seem to be good over and above, or at least in addition to, the goodness of happiness. In Jim's case, then, this is why we see Jim's killing the villager as ethically ambiguous. Indeed, in order to kill the villager, Jim must sacrifice the goodness of his commitment for the sake of producing happiness. In other words, Jim's action is good in that it saves 19 lives, but bad in that he must abandon a commitment in order to do so. This, then, is why we sense that Jim shooting the villager is indeed ethically relevant. Happiness is thus not, as utilitarianism would have it, the only criteria of goodness. Commitments are also good. This thus concludes Williams' argument. Perhaps he is correct in claiming that utilitarianism does not sit right with us because it overlooks the goodness of commitments. Or perhaps it isn't. Perhaps Williams is wrong in pointing projects or commitments as the ethically relevant consideration over and above happiness. But even if he is wrong in this regard, what I feel is important about Nozick and Mill is that they are able, Nozick and Williams, is that they are able to put their fingers on what must be considered a deep flaw in utilitarian thinking. The fact that utilitarianism doesn't sit right because something seems to matter to us, other than happiness. Indeed, as the experience machine shows, claiming happiness as the only good can be nothing less than horrifying.